Sarah Martinez had always been the type of person who believed hard work would eventually pay off. Growing up in a small military town in Texas, she watched her father serve in the Army for 22 years, before retiring as a sergeant major. The discipline, honor, and dedication she witnessed at home shaped her into someone who never backed down from a challenge. After graduating from college with a degree in computer science and a minor in military strategy, Sarah knew exactly what she wanted to do with her life. The Navy's elite cyber warfare division had recently opened applications for a specialized intelligence team that would work directly with various special operations units. The position required extensive background checks, physical fitness standards, and mental resilience testing that would challenge even the most prepared candidates. Sarah had spent months preparing for this opportunity, knowing that very few civilians were ever granted access to such classified operations. When she arrived at the naval base in Virginia Beach for her final interview, Sarah felt confident about her qualifications. She had excelled in every preliminary test, scored in the top 5% of all applicants, and received glowing recommendations from her previous supervisors in the private sector. Her expertise in cybersecurity and digital forensics was exactly what the team needed for their upcoming missions in various global hotspots. The interview panel consisted of 3 senior officers and 2 civilian contractors who had worked with special operations for years. They grilled her on technical scenarios, ethical dilemmas, and hypothetical situations that tested both her knowledge and her character. Sarah answered each question with precision and confidence, drawing on her extensive preparation and genuine passion for the work. However, as the weeks passed after her interview, Sarah began to sense that something wasn't quite right. Other candidates who had interviewed after her were already receiving their security clearances and assignment letters. Phone calls to the recruitment office were met with vague responses about ongoing evaluations and administrative delays. Her father, with his decades of military experience, recognized the signs immediately when Sarah described the situation to him during one of their weekly phone calls. The truth became clear when Sarah finally received a brief, impersonal letter stating that while her qualifications were impressive, the team had decided to move forward with other candidates who were better suited for the unique demands of the position. No specific reasons were given, no feedback was provided, and no suggestions for future opportunities were offered. The rejection felt hollow and incomplete, especially considering how well her interviews had gone. Sarah's frustration grew when she learned through informal channels that several male candidates with similar or even lesser qualifications had been accepted into the program. One particular individual, whom she had met during the interview process, had significantly less experience in cybersecurity and had struggled with some of the technical questions that Sarah had answered flawlessly. Yet he was already beginning his orientation at the base. Determined to understand what had happened, Sarah reached out to a former colleague who now worked as a contractor with various military units. During their conversation over coffee near the base, he confirmed what Sarah had begun to suspect. Despite the military's official policies regarding equal opportunity, certain old-school attitudes still persisted in some specialized units. Some senior members of the team believed that women, regardless of their qualifications, might not be able to handle the psychological pressure of working closely with special operations forces in high-stress environments. The revelation stung deeply because Sarah knew it had nothing to do with her actual abilities or potential contributions to the team. She had proven herself capable of handling intense pressure throughout her career, had worked in male-dominated environments before, and had specifically sought out this opportunity because she wanted to serve her country in a meaningful way. The rejection felt like a betrayal of everything she had been taught about merit-based advancement and equal opportunity. Rather than accept defeat, Sarah decided to document everything she could about the selection process. She carefully reviewed all her correspondence, gathered copies of her test scores and interview feedback, and began researching the backgrounds of the candidates who had been selected. What she discovered painted a clear picture of bias that went beyond simple preference for experience or technical skills. Sarah also began networking within the military and contractor communities, attending professional conferences and reaching out to other women who had faced similar challenges in their careers. She learned that her experience was not unique, and that several other qualified women had been passed over for similar positions in recent years. This knowledge only strengthened her resolve to find a way forward, not just for herself but for other women who might face the same obstacles in the future. As she continued her research and networking efforts, Sarah remained professionally active in the cybersecurity field, taking on consulting projects that kept her skills sharp and her security clearance active. She knew that if an opportunity ever arose to join the team, she needed to be ready to prove herself immediately. Little did she know that her persistence and professionalism would soon catch the attention of someone who had the power to change everything. Commander Jake Thompson had earned his reputation the hard way through 15 years of distinguished service with the Navy SEALs. His missions had taken him to some of the most dangerous places on Earth, from the mountains of Afghanistan to the urban battlefields of Iraq. What set Jake apart from many of his peers wasn't just his tactical expertise or physical prowess, but his ability to recognize talent, regardless of where it came from or what package it arrived. And Jake had recently been assigned as the liaison between SEAL Team 6 and the Cyber Warfare Division that had rejected Sarah's application. His new role required him to bridge the gap between traditional special operations and the increasingly digital nature of modern warfare. Cyber threats were evolving rapidly, and the military needed specialists who could think like both hackers and warriors to stay ahead of sophisticated adversaries. During his first week in the liaison position, Jake reviewed the personnel files of the cyber warfare team members. He was looking for individuals who could potentially be embedded with SEAL units during sensitive operations, where digital intelligence gathering would be crucial. As he read through the files, he noticed something that troubled him deeply. The team was composed entirely of men, despite the fact that some of the most innovative cybersecurity work in the private sector was being done by women. Jake's concern wasn't based on political correctness or social pressure. His experience in combat had taught him that the best teams were built on merit and diverse perspectives. He had served alongside female pilots, intelligence officers, and support personnel who had performed with exceptional skill under the most challenging circumstances. He knew that excluding talented individuals based on gender was not just unfair, it was strategically foolish. When Jake inquired about the selection process with the team's commanding officer, Captain Reynolds, he received vague explanations about team cohesion and operational requirements. Captain Reynolds, a career officer who had spent most of his time in traditional naval roles, expressed concerns about how SEAL teams might react to working with female cyber specialists in high-pressure situations. He suggested that it would be better to avoid potential complications by maintaining the current all-male composition. Jake listened politely to these explanations, but his years of combat experience told him that Captain Reynolds was making assumptions rather than decisions based on actual operational needs. Jake had worked with mixed-gender teams in various capacities and had never seen gender cause operational problems when all team members were properly trained and qualified. In fact, he had often found that diverse teams brought different perspectives that enhanced overall mission effectiveness. Determined to get a clearer picture of the selection process, Jake requested access to the application files from the most recent recruitment cycle. What he discovered confirmed his suspicions. Several highly qualified female candidates had been rejected, despite having superior technical qualifications compared to some of the men who were selected. One file in particular caught his attention. Sarah Martinez's application showed test scores and interview evaluations that placed her among the top candidates in the entire pool. Jake spent considerable time reviewing Sarah's background and qualifications. Her technical expertise was exactly what SEAL teams needed for the increasingly complex digital aspects of modern operations. Her education, work experience, and security clearance all aligned perfectly with the team's requirements. Most importantly, her psychological evaluations indicated the kind of mental toughness and adaptability that Jake knew were essential for working with Special Operations Forces. After discussing the situation with several trusted colleagues, Jake realized that he had both an opportunity and an obligation to address what he saw as a significant problem. The military's effectiveness depended on recruiting and retaining the best talent available, regardless of gender. By excluding qualified women like Sarah, the Cyber Warfare Division was weakening itself and potentially putting future missions at risk. Jake decided to take action, but he knew he needed to be strategic about his approach. Direct confrontation with Captain Reynolds would likely result in entrenched positions and bureaucratic resistance. Instead, Jake began building a case based on operational necessity and mission effectiveness. He started documenting specific scenarios where the cyber team's current capabilities had fallen short and where someone with Sarah's specialized skills could have made a difference. Jake also began reaching out to other SEAL team leaders to gauge their actual attitudes toward working with qualified female specialists. What he discovered was quite different from Captain Reynolds' assumptions. Most of the experienced operators Jake spoke with were primarily concerned with competence and reliability. They wanted team members who could perform under pressure and contribute to mission success, regardless of gender. Armed with this information, Jake began developing a plan to give Sarah and other qualified women a fair opportunity to prove themselves. He knew that changing entrenched attitudes would require more than just policy changes. It would require demonstrating through actual results that diverse teams could be more effective than homogeneous ones. Jake's reputation and influence within the special operations community gave him the credibility needed to make such a demonstration possible. The key would be finding the right opportunity to showcase Sarah's abilities in a way that would be impossible for skeptics to dismiss or rationalize away. Jake began monitoring upcoming missions and training exercises, looking for situations where Sarah's unique skills could make a decisive difference. He knew that if he could arrange for Sarah to prove herself in a real operational context, it would be much harder for anyone to argue that she didn't belong on the team. The opportunity Jake had been waiting for presented itself during a routine briefing about an upcoming training exercise. The scenario involved a simulated hostage rescue mission where SEAL teams would need to infiltrate a compound while simultaneously disabling sophisticated electronic security systems and extracting digital intelligence from multiple computer networks. The current cyber warfare team had struggled with similar scenarios in previous exercises, often requiring multiple attempts to complete their digital objectives. Jake immediately recognized that this exercise would be perfect for demonstrating Sarah's capabilities. The mission required exactly the kind of advanced cybersecurity skills that had made her application stand out from the other candidates. More importantly, the exercise would take place in a controlled environment where her performance could be objectively measured and evaluated by multiple observers. However, getting Sarah involved in the exercise would require careful maneuvering through military bureaucracy. Jake couldn't simply bypass Captain Reynolds' authority, but he could leverage his own position and relationships to create an opportunity. He began by reaching out to Admiral Patricia Coleman, who oversaw special operations training programs and had a reputation for being both fair and focused on operational effectiveness. Admiral Coleman had worked her way up through the ranks during a time when opportunities for women in the military were even more limited than they were now. She had faced her own share of skepticism and bias throughout her career, but had always let her results speak for themselves. When Jake approached her with his concerns about the cyber warfare team's selection process and his proposal to include Sarah in the upcoming exercise, Admiral Coleman listened with interest. Jake presented his case methodically, focusing on operational needs rather than fairness issues. He showed Admiral Coleman the performance data from previous exercises, highlighting where the current cyber team had fallen short of objectives. He then presented Sarah's qualifications and explained how her specific skills could address those shortcomings. Most importantly, he proposed a solution that would allow Sarah to prove herself, without disrupting existing team dynamics or creating unnecessary controversy. Admiral Coleman appreciated Jake's approach and agreed that the military needed to make decisions based on capability rather than assumptions. She authorized Jake to bring Sarah in as an independent contractor for the exercise, with the understanding that her performance would be thoroughly evaluated by neutral observers. If Sarah performed well, it would open the door for her to be reconsidered for permanent placement on the cyber warfare team. Jake contacted Sarah through official channels, explaining that an opportunity had arisen for her to demonstrate her skills in a special operations training environment. He was careful not to oversell the opportunity or make promises about guaranteed outcomes, but he made it clear that this could be her chance to prove that the initial rejection had been a mistake. Sarah's response was immediate and enthusiastic. She had been waiting for exactly this kind of opportunity. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of preparation for Sarah. She had to complete additional security briefings, undergo medical evaluations, and familiarize herself with the specific equipment and protocols used by SEAL teams. Jake arranged for her to spend time with members of the cyber warfare team to understand their current procedures and limitations, though he was careful not to reveal the true purpose of her involvement to avoid creating unnecessary tension. During these preparation sessions, Sarah impressed everyone she worked with through her technical knowledge and professional demeanor. She asked thoughtful questions about operational constraints and showed genuine interest in understanding how cyber operations integrated with physical tactics. Several team members privately commented to Jake that they wished they had someone with her expertise available for their regular missions, Captain. Reynolds remained skeptical about the exercise and made his concerns known to Jake during several tense conversations. He worried that including Sarah would distract from the training objectives and create unnecessary complications. Jake assured him that Sarah would operate independently and that her involvement would be carefully managed to avoid any disruption to established procedures. As the exercise date approached, word began to spread through the special operations community that something interesting was going to happen during the training. Jake had quietly arranged for several influential officers to observe the exercise, knowing that if Sarah performed well, he wanted credible witnesses who could speak to her capabilities in future discussions about the cyber warfare team's composition. Sarah spent the final days before the exercise studying the facility layout, understanding the security systems she would need to defeat, and developing multiple contingency plans for different scenarios. She knew that this was likely her only chance to prove herself, and she was determined to make the most of it. Her technical preparation was thorough, but she also worked on the mental aspects of performing under pressure while being closely scrutinized by skeptical observers. The night before the exercise, Jake met with Sarah to review final details and provide encouragement. He reminded her that she had earned this opportunity through her qualifications and persistence, not through any kind of special favor. He also shared some insights from his own experience about performing under pressure and dealing with skeptics. Most importantly, he assured her that regardless of the outcome, she would have the satisfaction of knowing she had been given a fair chance to prove herself. Sarah felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement as she prepared for what could be the most important day of her professional life. She knew that her performance would be evaluated not just on technical criteria, but also on how well she integrated with the SEAL team and handled the stress of a high-pressure operational environment. Everything she had worked for was riding on her ability to deliver exceptional results when it mattered most. The training exercise began at dawn, with a comprehensive briefing that outlined the mission parameters and objectives. The scenario involved rescuing hostages from a fortified compound, while simultaneously extracting critical intelligence from computer systems that would be destroyed if the digital infiltration was detected. The SEAL team would have a narrow window of opportunity to coordinate their physical assault with Sarah's cyber operations. Sarah was positioned in a mobile command center approximately half a mile from the target compound. Her workstation was equipped with the latest hacking tools and communication equipment that would allow her to coordinate with the SEAL team in real time. She would need to disable multiple layers of electronic security, access heavily encrypted computer networks, and extract specific intelligence files, all while the physical assault was taking place. As the exercise commenced, Sarah immediately began her digital reconnaissance of the target systems. She quickly identified the compound's network architecture and began mapping out the most efficient attack vectors. Her years of experience in cybersecurity had taught her to think like both a defender and an attacker, allowing her to anticipate countermeasures and develop backup plans for different scenarios. The first challenge came when Sarah discovered that the compound's security systems were more sophisticated than the intelligence briefings had indicated. The network was protected by advanced intrusion detection systems that would trigger immediate lockdown protocols if they detected unauthorized access attempts. Sarah realized that she would need to use a more subtle approach than the brute force methods that had been employed in previous exercises. Working quickly but carefully, Sarah developed a multi-stage attack that would gradually compromise different system components while appearing to be routine network maintenance activities. She created false digital signatures that would allow her access requests to appear legitimate to the automated security systems. This approach required significantly more time and skill than straightforward hacking attempts, but it was the only way to avoid triggering defensive measures. Meanwhile, the SEAL team had reached their insertion point and was preparing to begin their assault on the compound. Jake was monitoring both the physical operation and Sarah's progress from the command center, serving as the communication link between the two elements of the mission. He could see that Sarah was making steady progress through the digital defenses, but he also knew that timing would be critical for mission success. As Sarah gained access to the first layer of the compound's computer network, she discovered that the intelligence files were stored on a completely separate system that was not connected to the main network. This meant that she would need to gain physical access to internal terminals within the compound itself, something that had not been anticipated in the original mission planning. Sarah quickly developed a new strategy that would require precise coordination with the SEAL team's movements. Sarah contacted Jake through secure communications and explained the situation. She had identified the locations of the internal terminals and could guide the SEAL team to them, but someone would need to physically connect her equipment to the isolated systems. This added a new level of complexity to the mission and required real-time adaptation by both Sarah and the assault team. Jake relayed Sarah's intelligence to the SEAL team leader, who immediately recognized the value of having such detailed information about the compound's internal layout and security systems. Sarah's digital reconnaissance had revealed details about guard positions, surveillance camera blind spots, and internal defenses that significantly enhanced the team's tactical options. The SEAL team adjusted their assault plan based on Sarah's intelligence, demonstrating the kind of seamless integration between cyber and physical operations that had been the goal of the entire program. As the SEAL team breached the compound's perimeter, Sarah simultaneously launched her attack on the external security systems. She disabled alarm systems, looped surveillance camera feeds, and disrupted communication systems that would have allowed the defenders to coordinate their response. Her timing was precise, creating windows of opportunity that the SEAL team exploited to advance deeper into the compound. The most challenging moment came when the SEAL team reached the first internal terminal. Sarah had to guide them through the process of connecting her equipment, while they were under simulated fire from exercise participants playing the role of hostile defenders. The connection process required several minutes, during which the SEAL team was exposed and vulnerable, making communication and trust between Sarah and the assault team absolutely critical. Sarah's calm voice provided clear, step-by-step instructions that allowed the SEAL team member to successfully establish the connection, even under intense pressure. Once the link was established, Sarah was able to rapidly extract the required intelligence files while simultaneously covering her digital tracks to prevent the simulated defenders from realizing what had happened. The exercise concluded with complete mission success. The SEAL team had successfully rescued all hostages, neutralized the simulated threats, and extracted safely from the compound. Sarah had not only completed all of her cyber objectives, but had also provided tactical intelligence that significantly enhanced the physical operations' effectiveness. The integration between cyber and physical operations had been seamless, demonstrating exactly the kind of capability that modern special operations required. The observing officers were visibly impressed by the exercise results. Several of them approached Jake immediately after the conclusion to ask about Sarah's background and availability for future operations. Admiral Coleman, who had watched the entire exercise from the command center, made notes throughout the operation that would become part of her official report on the cyber warfare program's effectiveness. The immediate aftermath of the exercise created a buzz of excitement among the special operations community. Word spread quickly about the successful integration of advanced cyber capabilities with traditional SEAL tactics, and many officers began asking when similar support would be available for their own missions. The performance metrics from the exercise showed significant improvements over previous training scenarios, with mission completion times reduced and tactical advantages that had never been achieved before. Admiral Coleman wasted no time in scheduling a comprehensive debrief with all participants and observers. During this session, each SEAL team member was asked to provide honest feedback about working with Sarah and the cyber support capabilities she had provided. Their responses were overwhelmingly positive, with several team members specifically noting how Sarah's real-time intelligence and system manipulation had directly contributed to their tactical success. The SEAL team leader, Master Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, had initially been skeptical about working with any civilian contractor during their operations. However, his debrief comments were particularly significant because of his reputation for being demanding and direct in his assessments. Rodriguez stated that Sarah's support had been more valuable than any external assistance he had received in his 15-year career with special operations. He specifically requested that she be made available for future training, exercises, and real-world missions. Reynolds found himself in an increasingly difficult position as the positive feedback continued to pour in from credible sources. Throughout the special operations community, the objective performance data from the exercise made it impossible to argue that Sarah's contributions had been anything less than exceptional. Several senior officers who had observed the exercise began asking pointed questions about why someone with such obvious capabilities was not already part of the cyber warfare. Team Jake carefully documented all of the feedback and performance data, knowing that he would need comprehensive evidence to support his recommendation that Sarah be offered a permanent position on the team. He also reached out to other women in the military who had faced similar challenges, gathering additional context about how to navigate the administrative and political aspects of creating lasting change rather than just winning a single battle. Sarah herself was somewhat overwhelmed by the positive response to her performance. She had hoped to prove that she belonged on the team, but the level of enthusiasm from the SEAL community exceeded her expectations. Multiple team leaders began reaching out to request her support for upcoming missions, creating a demand for her services that went far beyond the original cyber warfare team position she had sought. The success of the exercise also attracted attention from higher levels of the military hierarchy. Pentagon officials who had been monitoring the integration of cyber capabilities with special operations began asking for detailed reports about the exercise and its implications for future military doctrine. Sarah's performance had demonstrated capabilities that defense planners had been theorizing about but had never seen implemented effectively in practice. Jake recognized that this attention created both opportunities and risks for Sarah's future prospects. On one hand, the high-level interest could lead to expanded opportunities and resources for cyber-physical integration programs. On the other hand, it could also create pressure for immediate results that might compromise the careful relationship building that would be necessary for long-term success. Admiral Coleman scheduled a private meeting with Sarah to discuss her future options and gauge her interest in different possible career paths. During this conversation, Sarah learned that her performance had opened doors to opportunities she had never even considered. In addition to the original cyber warfare team position, she was now being considered for roles with various special operations units, intelligence agencies, and even newly created positions that would focus specifically on developing cyber-physical integration capabilities. However, Sarah remained focused on her original goal of joining the cyber warfare team that had initially rejected her. She felt that accepting the position would validate not only her own qualifications, but also demonstrate that the selection process could be improved to better identify and utilize talent, regardless of gender. She also believed that working with that specific team would allow her to have the greatest impact on operational effectiveness. The decision about Sarah's future placement ultimately rested with Admiral Coleman and the senior leadership of the special operations community. They had to balance several competing interests, including the immediate operational needs of various units, the long-term development of cyber warfare capabilities, and the broader implications for military personnel policies. The success of the exercise had created momentum for change, but implementing that change would require careful planning and execution. Captain Reynolds requested a private meeting with Admiral Coleman to discuss his concerns about the rapid pace of change being demanded by the exercise results. He argued that while Sarah's performance had been impressive, integrating her into the existing team would require significant adjustments to established procedures and team dynamics. He suggested that it might be better to create a separate unit for cyber-physical integration operations rather than modifying the current team structure. Admiral Coleman listened to Captain Reynolds' concerns but recognized that his suggestions were motivated more by resistance to change than by legitimate operational considerations. She had seen similar patterns throughout her own career, where institutional inertia and unconscious bias created obstacles to necessary improvements in military effectiveness. The exercise results had provided clear evidence that current approaches were suboptimal, and she was determined to implement changes based on that evidence. The final decision would need to balance operational effectiveness with organizational stability, ensuring that improvements in capability did not come at the cost of team cohesion or mission readiness. However, the overwhelming evidence from the exercise made it clear that excluding qualified individuals like Sarah was a strategic mistake that the military could no longer afford to make. Admiral Coleman spent several days reviewing all the evidence, feedback, and recommendations before making her final decision about Sarah's placement and the broader implications for the cyber warfare program. The exercise results had provided compelling proof that the current selection process was failing to identify and utilize the best available talent. More importantly, the operational advantages demonstrated during the exercise showed that diverse teams with complementary skills could achieve results that homogeneous teams simply could not match. The Admiral's decision was announced during a formal briefing, attended by all relevant stakeholders, including Captain Reynolds, Jake, Sarah, and several senior officers who had observed the exercise. Admiral Coleman began by acknowledging that the military had a responsibility to constantly evolve and improve its capabilities in response to changing threats and available technologies. She emphasized that this evolution required making decisions based on objective evidence rather than traditional assumptions or personal comfort zones. Sarah was officially offered a permanent position on the cyber warfare team, with the additional responsibility of helping to develop training protocols for integrating cyber specialists with special operations units. The position came with security clearances and access that exceeded what had originally been offered to the initial team members, reflecting the expanded scope of responsibilities that her demonstrated capabilities had created. Captain Reynolds was reassigned to a different position that better matched his traditional naval background and experience. While this reassignment was presented as a normal career development move, everyone understood that it reflected Admiral Coleman's determination to ensure that the cyber warfare program would be led by officers who embraced innovation rather than resisted it. The new commanding officer selected for the team was known for her ability to integrate diverse personnel and create high-performing teams. Jake's role in advocating for Sarah and facilitating her opportunity was formally recognized through official commendations and consideration for expanded responsibilities in future cyber-physical integration programs. His willingness to challenge established practices based on operational evidence rather than personal relationships had demonstrated exactly the kind of leadership that the military needed to remain effective in rapidly changing environments. The success of Sarah's integration into the team exceeded even Admiral Coleman's optimistic expectations. Within 6 months, the cyber warfare team's performance metrics showed significant improvements across all categories of evaluation. More importantly, requests for the team's support from special operations units increased dramatically as word spread about their enhanced capabilities. Sarah's presence had not only added new technical skills, but had also changed the team's overall approach to problem-solving in ways that benefited everyone. Sarah's success also created a ripple effect throughout the military's recruitment and selection processes. Admiral Coleman used the cyber warfare team's improved performance as evidence in broader discussions about personnel policies and the importance of merit-based selection criteria. Several other qualified women who had been previously overlooked for various specialized positions were given new opportunities to prove themselves based on the precedent that Sarah's case had established. The changes extended beyond just gender-based improvements in fairness. The exercise had demonstrated that effective teams required diverse perspectives and complementary skills that could not be achieved through traditional selection methods that prioritized similarity over capability. This insight led to broader reforms in how the military identified and developed talent across multiple specialties and operational areas. Sarah's relationship with the SEAL teams that she supported continued to strengthen through successful, real-world missions that built on the capabilities demonstrated during the initial exercise. Her reputation within the special operations community grew as she consistently delivered results that enhanced mission effectiveness and operational security. Several team leaders began specifically requesting her support for their most challenging assignments. The long-term impact of Jake's intervention went far beyond Sarah's individual career success. The precedent established by Admiral Coleman's decision created a framework for addressing similar situations throughout the military hierarchy. Officers who witnessed the positive results of challenging biased selection processes became more willing to advocate for qualified candidates who might otherwise be overlooked due to unconscious assumptions or institutional inertia. Years later, Sarah would often reflect on how a single exercise had transformed not only her own career, but also contributed to broader changes in military culture and effectiveness. She remained grateful to Jake for his willingness to take professional risks to create opportunities for others, and she made sure to pay that support forward by mentoring other women and minorities who faced similar challenges in their military careers. The cyber warfare team eventually became a model for other military units seeking to integrate diverse talents and capabilities. The success metrics and operational achievements that followed Sarah's integration provided concrete evidence that merit-based selection processes and inclusive team composition were not just matters of fairness but were essential components of military effectiveness in the modern era. Jake continued his career with the knowledge that his decision to advocate for Sarah had contributed to meaningful improvements in military capability and organizational culture. His experience became a case study used in leadership development programs, demonstrating how individual actions based on principle and evidence could create positive changes that extended far beyond the immediate situation. The story of Sarah's initial exclusion and eventual success became part of the institutional memory that helped future leaders recognize and address similar situations before they resulted in the loss of valuable talent and capabilities. The military had learned that its strength came not from maintaining traditional approaches but from continuously evolving to identify and utilize the best available human resources, regardless of their background or characteristics.